Hi, this is Mike from Connected German, back with another video. Today we're going to be looking at an introduction to forming the future tense, and this is done with our verb werden. Things you're going to want to know before starting this video: have a basic idea of how subject-verb agreement works. And also good to know, but not absolutely required, have some experience with stem vowel changing verbs. It'll help a lot when we talk about conjugations towards the end. Not required, but it's a good idea. Also, another good idea, experience using multiple verbs in a sentence. As we're going to show, we use werden with another action verb. Alright, so let's get into it. There are two ways to show future tense. The first way is, of course, by using time phrases like tomorrow, next week, next month, that sort of thing. And that's really something that we're going to get into part 2. For this video, what we're going to be doing is introducing the verb werden. And it has multiple uses. If you're familiar with some of the other uses, we're really only going to be using how werden applies to the future tense. And essentially what we do is we use werden with an infinitive or a verb in the dictionary form, unconjugated. That is the focus of this video, werden. And it essentially means will in English. So let's go ahead and look at an example. Ich werde zur Post gehen. I will go to the post office. Will, in German, shown with werde. Now, what do we notice about this helping verb werde? Well, there's a couple things. Number one, we notice that it agrees with the subject, just like all other helping verbs do. The second thing that we notice, specifically about the conjugation, is that it has an E at the ending, and this is a very common ending for agreeing with the pronoun ich. The third thing that we notice is that the helping verb werden appears next to the subject, just like other helping verbs in most simple sentences. There are, of course, exceptions when you get into multiple clause sentences and subordinating conjunctions and all of that, but just simple sentences, the helping verb appears conjugated next to the subject. Okay, let's look at another example. Wir werden das Brot essen. So instead of ich, we're switching to wir. We will eat the bread. Again, we have our form of werden. It's conjugated according to agree with wir, and it stands for will. So there really is a word in German that means will, just like we would express the future in English. So what do we notice now? A couple things. Werden still agrees with the subject, as I pointed out, and in this case it has an en ending. It kind of looks like the infinitive form, our dictionary form, and the reason for that is that 99.9% of verbs, their conjugation for wir is the exact same as the infinitive. It's a little tip. The only exception is sein, to be. But anytime you're looking for the conjugation of wir, it's the same thing as the infinitive of the verb. Okay. Look at one more. Sie werden mit den Kindern spielen. And in case you're wondering what form of sie I was using, I was referring to the plural they. They will play with the kids. Okay? So, how do we express will in this case? Werden. Notice that it also has an en ending. And here's another tip for you. We said that the conjugation of the verb to agree with wir in the last example is always the same as the infinitive. Same thing if you're trying to express they. Sie werden. The conjugation has that en ending just like the infinitive. So there's a helpful tip for you. Now, what do we notice about the second verb in this sentence? It's spielen. What do we notice about it? It appears at the end of the sentence, or if you have multiple clauses within a sentence, it would appear at the end of the clause. And this is a little bit different than English because you notice that the helping verb will and the action verb play are always right next to each other. They will play with the kids. He will go to the post office. He will eat the bread. It's always will plus the action verb. But in German, when you have two verbs, a helping verb and an action verb, the helping verb appears next to the subject, which it does here. Werden appears next to the subject sie. The infinitive, or rather the action verb, appears at the end of the sentence in the infinitive or dictionary form. In other words, you've conjugated the helping verb, in this case werden. You do not conjugate again. You get the standard dictionary form for your action verb at the end of the sentence. And as I pointed out right there, yes, it's in the infinitive form. So that's basically a rundown of how to use werden in sentences. Now it's time for you to try one. I'll give you the English. I will do the homework. If you want a second to think about it, you can pause the video. I will give you some tips, though. The infinitive form of to do in English is machen. And the homework is die Hausaufgaben. So how are we going to form this? Let's get started. Ich. Now we need our form of will that agrees with ich. What's a common ending on the end of our verb? It's werde, with that e on the end. It agrees with ich. Subject-verb agreement. Now the rest of the sentence. How are we gonna say do the homework? Is the homework gonna be first and then the action verb at the end? What are we gonna do? Well, you are right if you said we need our direct object here before our infinitive, which is die Hausaufgaben. Now we need our action verb, which is machen. Ich werde die Hausaufgaben machen. Action verb at the end in the infinitive form. Not conjugated according to the subject because you already had one verb do that. In this case, werde. Okay, conjugations of werden. We have it set up for the singular and the plural. Here are our pronouns. In the singular, ich, du, er, sie, es, represented by I, you, he, she, it. And in the plural, for more than one person, wir, we, ihr, you guys, so you plural, and sie, they. Now, we've already seen a couple of the conjugations in our examples. First one was for ich. I is a very common ending for ich. Ich werde. We've also seen it for our conjugation of wir. Wir werden. Just like the infinitive werden. We've also seen it for they. Exactly the same as our infinitive. Sie werden. With an en at the end. Now, for our conjugation of ihr, you guys, it's very common to have a T in the conjugation, and it's going to follow the same patterns with an ET, just like all of our endings have E's on them. In the case of wir, it's EN. Z, it's EN. We're still going to follow that E pattern, but we need a T for ihr. Ihr werdet. Now we get into the tricky part. And this is where your experience with stem vowel changing verbs will help, because as you have had experience with these, you'll realize that sometimes the conjugations get a little tricky, and when they get tricky for stem vowel changing verbs, the irregularities are going to come for the du conjugation and for the as conjugations. So let's go ahead and take a look at what those look like. Take a guess if you'd like. Du wirst. Very common in a stem vowel changing verb for the E to switch to an I. Notice how it has a regular ST at the ending. Wirst. ST is still very normal at the end for du, but we do have a change from E to I. And also, remembering stem vowel changing verbs is that if there's a change in the vowel for du, that same vowel change is going to carry over for as. So our conjugation is wird. It's a little bit irregular. Now keep in mind, werden isn't actually a stem vowel changing verb. It doesn't fit into the same category at all. But we do see patterns. Why I'm referencing stem vowel changing verbs is because where it is irregular, specifically in the du and the as forms, follows the pattern much like stem vowel changing verbs. So it's not an incredibly irregular verb that we're dealing with. There's a pattern to it. So if you have experience with stem vowel changing verbs, that'll help you quite a bit. Alright, so those are the conjugations of werden, and we are familiar with how to formulate it in a sentence. Recap real fast. Werden is a helping verb, and like all helping verbs, it has to agree with the subject. As a helping verb, it often appears next to the subject in simple sentences. In all of these examples that we showed here, it was subject, helping verb. Ich werde, wir werden, Sie werden, and so on. We also saw that the action verb appears in the infinitive form and goes to the end of the clause, or the end of the sentence in this case, since we were dealing with very simple sentences. The fourth thing that we learned from this is that when conjugating them, the du and the as conjugations are irregular. They do follow a systematic pattern, much like the stem vowel changing verbs. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at in part 2, well, first we're going to have a quiz on how you form the future tense. I will be giving you English sentences and asking you to create the German sentences. In addition, we're going to get into the other way that you express the future. And if you remember from the beginning of the video, it was about dealing with time phrases like tomorrow, next week, next month, that sort of thing. All of those things we will get into in part 2. Thanks for watching, and be sure to stop by Connect to German for more tips for learning German.